Welcome to part 2 of my video series on hand-hammered standing seam roofing here at Make Do DIY. This video is about an hour long. It's October 30th, 2021, 9 in the morning. And this video here is to show how to bend a pan. This material is pretty much pure aluminum, 1100 series. And it is 46 thousandths of an inch, or 43 thousandths of an inch, I can't remember. And what does that mean to you? Well, a pop can, a soda can, a Coke can is essentially 10 thousandths of an inch. So this is about 4.5 times the thickness of a pop can. And because it's pure aluminum, it's very easy to work. And it's flexible, it's malleable. It does work hard the more times you roll it over. So this is going to be the top of my pan. And then I have two sides. I have a machined side that came from the factory, and then I have a side right here that I cut with a rough circular saw. And what I like to do is use the finished side as the longer, taller one that'll overlap the previous installed pan. And I use the rough side as 1.5 inches tall. Now these tongs I bought, probably made in the 1800s by a blacksmith. And this is what they use to form the pans. They didn't have nice material like this, aluminum. What they had, really rich people had, was copper sheets. And then your average farmer, if he was lucky enough to have a house roofed in metal, used something called turn. And it was basically sheet metal that was tinned in lead to keep it from rusting. And I'll include some local photos of roofs that were done that way in the 1800s that are still standing up today to the test of time. The only thing that owners have done to maintain them is paint them with metal roofing paint, because over the years the lead coating wore off and started rusting. So the only thing I've really done to modify these tongs is add new stops, because the old ones were rusted out. Pieces of sheet metal that didn't hold the aluminum at the right length. So I just screwed in a couple pieces of angled aluminum because it worked pretty good. Now the standing seam roofing companies do sell really nice rollers. They usually have 6 wheels on them. You can go up and down the edge of this and slowly bend it at 15 degrees, 30, 45, and just work your way up to a 90 real quick and fast. But none of them are rated for the thickness of this. I was thinking about purchasing one, but unfortunately sometimes the material you get is the material you get. Ideally, I would have wanted 40 thousandths of an inch, and those tools would have handled it, but beggars can't be choosers. So, could I get this material today? No. I basically bought it from a local aluminum recycling and manufacturing plant. And basically back in 2013, the cost of aluminum was nothing, and the cost of energy was a bigger factor. So when they misrolled a sheet, it would just sit out in the yard in the rain, waiting until a time when they could get around to melting it down and recycling the materials. Sometimes they would just offer it up to locals for scrap metal prices, just because it was easier than melting it down and dealing with it. Today, not the case. They use 100% of any misrolled items or products that they make, and you can't buy it from them unless you're paying premium prices. So this side is the 1.75 side. And basically, when this one goes up against the next pan, this piece will come up and roll over the top of this one. So believe it or not, when I first got into this project, I read an article from Mother Earth News from a friend of mine who saw that I was getting ready to tackle this project. And it said, hey, you can find these tools pretty easily in swap sheets. And so that's what I did. I was looking at Craigslist at the time in the local swap sheet. We didn't have Facebook Marketplace at the time. And I found a set. I found tongs, hand anvil, 2 sets of tongs, this set of tongs, and something called a foot seamer, which basically would take the lighter materials and you could seam just using your feet. But I could not get the thicker material in the foot seamer. It's not right here. I'm just bending a couple angles so I can finish out the pan a little easier. Don't get me wrong, if I could have got this in 40 thousandths of an inch and invested in a seaming tool, I would have done it in a heartbeat. But the aesthetic of a hand-hammered roof is something nice to me. It's imperfect, kind of like those tongs. Now, this is an original anvil back from the 1800s that somebody probably dropped off a roof and cracked the casting right through there. Either that or they didn't like the length that it was being held apart, but this is obviously something that a roofer used all the time as a living, because they went and fixed it by brazing in this big heavy chunk of brass and then hand scraping it down with a file until it was smooth. I have seamed with it with this thick material, but it doesn't work so well because the material is so much thicker. It requires a taller seam. I can do it with that, but it's just difficult. So I brought a brand new anvil that was recently manufactured. So there's the pan, all ready to go up on the roof. Believe it or not, they're really easy to carry. You can grab it from the center. You just got to make sure that you don't bend it too much while getting it up on the roof, because you can warp it pretty significantly and then spend a lot of time on the roof flattening out. It's not fun. So 9:42, got the pan up here, came up, cleaned up any rough spots in the rough cut underneath, because I had a seam where the boards are meeting. Knocked down the high spots, got the majority of the construction debris out of the vent space underneath, and you can see that we have these cleats here that were previously installed last time I came here. And basically 2 screws, I double up at the bottom because the wind's got a lot of pickup here, and it's wrapped around and hammered over. And this over here is a finish seam. Let's see if I got a perfect one. I can't see all parts of the roll, but you can see how this rolls up and rolls in. Same thing's happening underneath there, it's just a little farther up because this whole building's a trapezoid, not a square. So what I do next is get the pan right up in the corner against the ridge vent and bring it over. And I like using these welder vice grips, because what I can do is get the smaller guy right underneath there, and it forces this pan down. And then I'll use one of these flat ones up at the top. This is where it gets hairy, because I got to worry about sliding. Okay, made it. I'll come up to the top, kick it over. That's a little too loose. Tighten it up a bit. There. Now I know it's not going to slide down on me. It's perfectly in line with the other one. And basically, how I do it, what works for me, is I put all the cleats on this side. And then I'll move the ladder over, install it in a new spot. And let's see, I need this hammer, this driver, and my newly manufactured anvil. It's got the higher sides. I'll put all the cleats in, all 14, run them down. Oh, I don't have a battery. There's one. Put all 14 cleats, run them down, move the ladder over. And then what I'll do is I'll tack it, I guess is the way to say it, in 3 spots. Once at the top, once at the middle, once at the bottom, around one of these cleats. And that just ensures that it's in place. I'm not going to pop the seam. And I'll run up and down 5 times, which takes a lot longer than what I just said. And roll the seam over twice. So traditional standing seam roofing, this is gonna stink. Right, for a while, it's right on the crack. So traditional standing seam roofing, usually the pans go right up to the top. And they don't have that angle that I folded into mine. And they roll the seams together one more time. But this material is much too thick to do that. And I already did one of these roofs on my different building and realized that I wanted a ridge vent to let the moisture escape. So I came up with this idea. And what I did is I ran 2 sheets continuously up and down, one on each side, cleats like that, rolled the top seam together, and then underneath the bottom I had it come out back in, and I screwed it in here. So the reason why these work, these roofs last forever, is because the fasteners are hidden, which is what I'm doing right now. So these zinc coated steel screws. Oh, I hit the screw. The joy of working right on a wood seam. Ah. So the beauty of this system, whether it be hand hammered or manufactured, is these seams are hidden. There's no penetration in the metal. That water can find its way into later. The disadvantage is you can never take this roof apart easily without destroying it. But I definitely have some roofs in my neighborhood that I'll take some pictures of. They've been around since the 1800s. And as long as they upkeep the paint on that steel, it's not going to go away. So I simply mark it, score it, give it a little more so I've got enough material to wrap around. Hammer it over. I totally did that one backwards. That's forgiving. This is just scrap metal that I had lying around. And basically it's a touch too long for what I'm doing here. God, I got no cutters up here either. Put that crap to the side for now. See if I can get away with it with this one. Looks like I'm gonna have to bring some clippers up here and just trim these down a touch. There we go. Yeah, so I build all my cleats out of scrap material, offcuts, damaged pieces. So sometimes they're not the ideal size. This, oh my God, I'm getting this backwards today. What the heck? I have to edit these parts out. So basically these cleats are just leftover chunks of metal that I didn't want to waste. Sometimes they're off sizes. This one ideally could be a little wider, but it would work. couple things I do a little different than the traditionalists. When they used to do these in the 1800s, they'd actually have a hammer with a hardwood head. So they couldn't damage the material. And nowadays we usually use dead blow or like rubber or plastic faced hammers. But after doing this for some years, I realized that this material is just tough and it can take it, and it's a lot more fat. It's a lot faster and more efficient to use a square-faced mason hammer. And all the traditionalists are doing gasping right now. But it works. It works really well. I've never had it pierce the material. I've never had it puncture in the material. I never had it rip, tear, crack. Never had any failures. One other thing I do different is a lot of people leave enough material left on the cleat this way so they can take it and fold it up over to cover up these, so these heads don't rub into the material as it breathes over the years, as the material expands and contracts and gets a snow load on it and loses its snow load. And, what I've noticed with this really thick material, by the time I do the final fold, it actually draws this pan upward about 1/4 of an inch. So they're nowhere near those screws. So I stopped doing it. It just wasn't worth my time. All right, I'll do one more for the camera, and then I'm going to turn my music on. And I'll keep the camera rolling, but you're not going to hear anything because I'll be listening to my music and not talking. All right, so I got the ladder moved over. It's 10:20, and now I can start tacking my seams. And basically, I want to get one in the bottom, middle, and top. Make sure that I'm not going to lose the seam. It's not going to come apart on me while I'm doing the whole thing. And this is super slippery sawdust on aluminum. It's like greased lightning. So I got my trusty little ladder here screwed into the bottom. Got my hammer, my anvil, and I'll start in the center. Just pick the centermost one of these. Make sure the aluminum is smashed down. And the first thing I do is knock over the 90. And I'll usually do that from one seam, excuse me, one cleat to the other cleat. The entire job, this is takes the most out of my body. So what I end up trying to do is not cut all my pans at once and get them formed up. I try to do that in between each one of these big seams so my body gets a break. I think since I started this project in March till now October, I've lost about 10 pounds of body fat and gained about 10 pounds of muscle. So that's the first roll, and you can still see the cleat under there. It's slightly thicker than all the rest. And then what I do is come back onto the other side with the shorter end and start hammering that at a 90 as best as I can. Traditionalists are seeing all the hammer marks in that metal and going, oh my god. Hey, it works. Because this material is so stiff, I can actually start bending the 90 down without even using the hammer at first. And this is what the finished product looks like. It feels like a big, fat, thick aluminum umbilical cord. And it gets so work hardened, there's really very little flex to it or movement. And go up at the top, repeat it, without falling on my butt. This, I'll just... throw him down here temporarily. There it is, right here. Again, you can see that thicker part right where the cleat is. Yay, I get to sit on some rough cut, so much more comfortable. It's also hard to get in here. You can kind of see that spiraling as the material folds into itself. Alright, don't need you anymore. It's gonna hurt when it comes off. Yay! I love walking on rough cut. Let's see, I'll probably do this one standing up from the bottom. Slide down all the sawdust here. Alright, I'll do this very bottom one. Now earlier, when I wasn't talking, listening to my music, you saw me jam some spray foam up underneath here. And the reason I did that is, as the pans get hot, when the sun comes out, the material expands and it bows. In the winter, when it gets really cold, it retracts and gets flat. And what I'm trying to do is block the space that honeybees and paper wasps, so they don't pack it with honey or larvae. So it's important to have that continuous vent to dry out any condensation that can get out underneath it. It's also important to keep the bugs out. And I'm speaking from experience. Trying to remove infestations of honeybees or paper wasps it's easy to kill them. It ain't easy to get the block out, the blockage in your vent. So that was step number one. It's kind of equivalent of tacking and welding. Just get your pieces and then together. Step number two is to bend everything over at a 90-degree angle. And I find that easier for me to start at the top and work my way down for each part of this seam. I guess I'll get above it since I'm hammering, since I'm right-handed. A lot of people wonder how water gets underneath the metal roof in the first place. And why you need ventilation under there. The simple answer is, on a cold night, the metal cools down to what the air temperature is. And then in the morning, when a warm front comes in, the air is full of moisture. All that moist, humid air gets on both sides of the metal. When it gets on the top here, it'll just drip down in the morning or evaporate off. When it gets underneath, typically it gets beaded and wet. But it usually doesn't drip unless it's really an extremely cold night before a really warm front comes in. Now, I observed this on porches that I've built before. So by having that ventilation underneath, it allows that dew, that condensation to burn off with airflow, rather than dripping down and soaking your wood, causing mold and rot. If it can't dry, it dies. Oh yeah, that feels real good right in my butt. So that lower roof down there, that overhang, that is 112 pitch. So for every 12 feet, there's only 1 foot of drop. And I've observed no leakage, even with 4 foot of snow sitting on top of it. And I have done that in a living space before. Off the other building I've done this on. And I'm not sure if it was necessary, but just for insurance, when I did that living space that had that 112 pitch roof, I put a little bead of silicone and hammered them together. Again, maybe it wasn't necessary, but it gave me peace of mind. So the first roof I've done on this was completed in 2010, so it's 11 years old now. I get up there once a year when I go to clean the chimney, investigate, look at all the seams, look at the trim, and really haven't had any issues with it. No leaks. Really hasn't changed how it's oxidized, because it is aluminum. And aluminum, like stainless steel, reacts with the oxygen to form a hard oxide. But unlike steel, the oxide actually protects it, keeps it from rusting further. And the only issue I had with the roof was my own fault. I accidentally dropped a hammer twice from a higher roof to a lower roof. It just happened to nail right in between there and punctured it. For a temporary stopgap, I threw some silicone in there. And then at the end of the year, I decided that I wanted to do a more permanent fix. So there's step number 1. Everything's at a 90. And I go back up to the top. That's step number 2, isn't it? Step number 3, and smash it all together over. Anyways, where I had the punctures, for a permanent fix, I got a stainless steel rotary brush, basically. Put it on an angle grinder, cleaned it all up real good. And then used a zinc rod. You see people quote unquote welding aluminum together with it. And they're not really welding, it's more like a brazing or a soldering, the way it wets the aluminum. I've never used it for actually keeping aluminum together, except for that. Basically, I was able to beat the roof up just hot enough to get it to beat up, kind of like you see when they pop a hole through the bottom of the Coke can and then solder it up with that zinc rod. And I kind of worry about galvanic corrosion and maybe failing. And every year I go up there and the zinc is turned black from oxidizing. But it's not getting any worse. Nothing's peeling off, and the aluminum's not getting oxidized anymore either, so they're working. This is definitely the most strenuous part of the job. This takes a ton of core strength. Support your body and the anvil and bring it all together. I fully expect this roof to outlast my great-grandchildren. Seeing how well the steel turn roofs have held up over the years with just a little maintenance of paint, which this will not require. The only thing that's really going to take this off is a hurricane. We don't have those around here. Or a fire. Don't get me wrong, a heavy hailstorm will dent the piss out of this, but I don't think it'll penetrate the spaces in between. You see right there, I'm kind of losing the seam. That happens. Pretty easy to get it back with this material. It's pretty forgiving. All right, step number 4. Get the second one over at a 90 degree. That's right, I should have done that all the way across the top while I had the chance. Damn it. Let's get creative. Turn that sideways. I'll finish this top part up now. All right. So what I had on this before was standard, what is it, 28, 26 gauge corrugated painted steel. I think it was put up in I don't know when this building was built. I'd have to look it up. I think it was early 2000s. And the reason I decided to start this roofing project this year.
Looked it up. Roof was originally built 2005.
It wasn't because I thought the roof was done and needed to get done.
And then replaced in 2021, 16 years.
Because I'm getting older. This work's getting harder. I thought So I decided, and I did this all by myself, so I decided the sooner I got it done, the better. But as I found out, as I ripped the old roof off, it was failing. There's obviously two crews, or two different people putting the steel on. And some of them very carefully torqued down the heads, and others put them in sideways, missed the 2x4 purlings all together, over torqued them, under torqued them. And I had the beginning of some leakage. And if allowed to continue, it would eventually rot it out to 2x4 purlings, and I would have had to replace those too. So I'm glad I got to it this year. Another thing I noticed was all the screw heads had begun to rust, because when the snow load cleared itself, it would literally rip the paint. Right off the top of the screw heads. So roofing that way is cheap and easy, but it's not forever. I really recommend people use snow brakes to keep the snow load from clearing, if the roof can handle it. That way the screw heads don't get all ripped up. Side switch, if you get out of here. If you design your building to take the snow load, keep it up there. Just another layer of insulation. The way I designed my roof, I've had heavy loads of 4-foot wet snow, and no issues. No icicles. No chance of the building collapsing. No chance of the roof collapsing. Snow stays up there. Don't have to clear it. This is step number 5. And this is where I like my bigger hammer. Yeah, I think the traditionalists are cringing because I'm using steel hammers on this. Wait till they see what I do with this one. I don't know how many ounces it is. It's a biggie. Whew. Step number 5, just bend it over. At this point, the aluminum just gets tougher and tougher. It's getting work hardened. I don't know, these look like tears, but they're not. They're just face marks of the hammer. All right. Drink a Monster. I'll do the 6th part of my seaming. just kind of like to slide down the roof as I go. And you can see this gets pulled right off the deck by about a 1/4 inch just because the material is so thick and it takes so much to pull it over. So I don't have to worry about those screw heads digging into it when I get a big snow load on it or when the roof expands and contracts. Now you can see why I don't cut all my pans at the same time. My body needs a chance to recover between seams. Oh, slide off. Ouch, ouch, ouch. When you're in that position for so long, your body doesn't want to unfold. Oh, there we go. There we go. One seam down. I've got 6 to go. Well, 6 more panels, so yeah, it'll be 6 more seams, won't it? Let's see. I'll do 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 seams, and this one will roll over the edge. And I'll get to that in the spring. Whew.
But I had a lot of help from this article that you're looking at right now. I'll provide a link in the description so you can read it yourself. But I had a lot of help from this article that you're looking at right now. I'll provide a link in the description so you can read it yourself.